So ADHD isn't fun whether you're 8 or 58. So we're going to talk about 3 steps you can take to improve ADHD symptoms. Just know that this is going to be a different viewpoint on ADHD than we see in the mainstream. So if that mainstream viewpoint on ADHD hasn't given you the results that you were looking for, well, a different viewpoint could be good news for you. Let's jump in.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
We sort of have this mindset that if we eat enough food that we can get up and walk to our car, that we have all the resources that we need. But every task that the body handles needs resources to complete it. Minerals, nutrients, amino acids, they're all important. Minerals are really important because minerals are needed for signals to travel from your body to your brain and from your brain back to your body. It's like electricity and water. If you put an electrical current in the water, it's going to shock you. It's not going to be a good time because that electrical current can travel through the minerals in the water. But if you put an electrical current in distilled water, this current doesn't travel. Now, I don't want you to try this, but it doesn't travel because there's no minerals for it to move through. This is just like your brain. Your brain needs those signals to travel through minerals or things don't work correctly. So to understand this a little bit better, let's look at seizures. Now, if a person has really low blood sugar, they can have a seizure. If a person has really low minerals, they can have a seizure. If a person has really low minerals and blood sugar at the same time, they're even more likely to have a seizure. Now, a seizure can be viewed as the body really not working correctly in that moment, right? I mean, it's basically a total shutdown of the body. So if a person has these issues, but not to the level that it's going to create a seizure, doesn't it make sense that the body and the brain might not work optimally? I mean, if these situations in an extreme are going to create a seizure, couldn't these situations a little bit less create a lot of problems? So maybe a person doesn't have seizures, but maybe they can't concentrate or they're hyperactive or they can't relax or all these other symptoms that we hear about. And what makes this even more interesting is that we hear a lot about ADHD and epilepsy going hand in hand. It's almost like, yeah, ADHD can turn into epilepsy if you don't get it under control, and ADHD can cause epilepsy. And what if the ADHD isn't causing epilepsy? What if these two issues just have the same underlying cause, and which one a person deals with can depend on how the body's reacting and how severe those issues are. Now, wouldn't that make sense? Now, I know there's a lot of circles out there that are not fond of things that make sense, but when we're looking at ourselves and our own body, we need to kind of look at the things that make sense. Kind of makes even more sense when we understand that a lot of these anti-seizure and anti-ADHD medications work because they restrict a person's ability to pee out their salts. And when those salts don't get peed out, that's more minerals staying in the body. Now there's more minerals for those signals to travel through. That could also be why we hear so much about these medications raising blood pressure for a lot of folks. It's holding the minerals in the system. And they'll tell you, well, it raises blood pressure because it's a stimulant. But, caffeine is a stimulant. And for some folks, caffeine will lower blood pressure because it's acting as a diuretic and causing the person to pee a lot of their minerals out. So it's important to kind of look at these things with a little bit of an open mind and maybe understand a little bit how the human body works to see why these issues are going on. Where we see this issue really magnified is if somebody's dealing with hypoglycemic type issues. Like we talked about in the beginning, if a person's minerals are already low and their blood sugar also goes really low at the same time, that's where you're really going to see the problems. And maybe the person doesn't have a seizure, but sure, couldn't they see some major ADHD symptoms coming on? With a hypoglycemic response, a person will eat some carbohydrate, starch, sugar type thing that will spike their blood sugar, and then their insulin is acting in this overreactive way that it creates a huge sugar crash. So it's in these sugar crashes that the real problems happen. And this kind of helps us understand why a ketogenic diet has been so successful with epilepsy for decades now. A lot of people will tell you, oh, it's because you're making these ketones, it gives the body another fuel source. But I feel a lot of it is about the fact that you're removing those sugar crashes when you're removing carbohydrates. Now, I'm not saying that you should go on a keto diet. Keto diets can be very appropriate for some people, but they're absolutely not right for every person. So you really need to look at your body chemistry to see if it works out right for a ketogenic diet. But you can see why this has been beneficial for those epilepsy folks by removing those sugar crashes. Now, I like to see people do some carbohydrates when they're having these issues, just the right types of carbohydrates, maybe some more medium food type carbohydrates that remove those spikes and crashes, but still give their body the carbohydrates that'll help them function a little bit easier while mineral levels are low. We've seen a lot of ADHD type clients, and they all had low mineral levels, and a lot of them seem to be having sugar crashing issues. So think about it like a toaster. If your toaster's not working, what do? You look to see if it's plugged in. You look to see if it's getting the juice to function the way that it's supposed to function. You don't send the toaster to therapy. You don't soak it in medication. You make sure that it's getting the juice it needs to toast your bread. So we want to look at the brain the same way. If somebody's minerals are low, that can cause trouble for those signals to travel. And if their sugar's crashing, that's going to cause trouble for the brain having the fuel it needs to function. We want to make sure both these pathways are working if a person's having a hard time having their brain work the right way. So here's the 3 simple steps you can take to improve ADHD type symptoms. Number 1 is to raise your mineral levels. Now, of course, you want to look at your blood pressure first. You don't want to say, oh man, I already have high blood pressure. You don't want to add minerals on top of that if your body's already having a lot of problems dealing with what's in this system now. We like to see people look at their body chemistry before they just take whatever the popular remedy is. We like people to work with their body instead of against it. So in my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, I teach people how to run simple self-tests at home so they can figure out where their body chemistry is. Now, this book is available on Amazon, but I'm going to put a link in the description below where you can download the whole book totally for free. We also have a free digestion course if someone would rather take a course instead of reading a book. I can't be bothered reading a book, but we have a free course if you'd rather do that. But when you look at your blood pressure, you can get an idea of where your mineral content is. But if your minerals appear to be low, you really got to raise them to improve these symptoms. Now, you can use mineral supplements. You could use a high quality sea salt or something like that to bring more minerals in. But what we really like to see people do is step number 2, which is improve any digestive malfunctions. It's really common for someone not to have digestion working correctly, and that means that you're not breaking down your food in a manner that allows you to pull the minerals out of that food and bring them into the system. So most people with really low minerals have low minerals because they can't pull it out of the food that they're eating. So if you're dealing with any digestive symptoms like burping, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, nausea, acid reflux, any of that stuff is a strong indication that digestion is not working correctly, and you'd want to either read my book or go through that digestion course to figure out which aspects might not be working correctly and the steps you need to take to improve those. And step number 3 to improve ADHD symptoms is to correct any hypoglycemic type issues. So it's really important that you're not creating these sugar spikes and crashes. And that means you might have to adjust the way that you're eating a little bit. You might have to reduce or change the types of carbohydrates or sugars that you're consuming. But you can also try to adjust your body chemistry so that your insulin is not such a bully. So to understand how to do that better, I really want you to watch our Understanding Hypoglycemia video, 5 steps you can take to improve hypoglycemia. Check that out and then put these things together to improve your ADHD symptoms. I can't wait to hear about your results.